All right, welcome back to the deep dive. If you're anything like us, you've probably spent the last few days trying to scrub the image of a celebrity being chased around a ring by a former world champion out of your brain.
Or maybe trying to explain to non-boxing fans why you just spent good money watching what looks suspiciously like a very, very expensive choreographed panic attack.
Exactly that, yeah. It was something else. Our mission today is a proper deep dive into the wreckage and the revenue generated by this whole affair. We're going to be dissecting all the immediate post-fight commentary, the expert breakdowns, and some of the, frankly, absurd fan chatter surrounding this colossal, bizarre, and utterly divisive heavyweight encounter. Anthony Joshua versus Jake Paul.
We've gone through everything, the serious boxing press, the pay-per-view commentary teams, and, highly charged social media threads, really trying to get a handle on the true impact of this event.
Not just on the two men, but on the wider sport itself.
Yeah.
So just to set the scene, we are, of course, talking about the professional heavyweight bout. It was scheduled for 8 rounds, held at the Kaseya Center in Miami, Florida.
And broadcast globally on Netflix Friday, December 19th, 2025. This really wasn't just a fight, was it?
Not at all. It was a cultural event designed from the ground up to just print money.
And the context is absolutely everything here. I mean, on one side, you've got Anthony Joshua, AJ, a former 2-time unified world heavyweight champion.
And his record speaks for itself. 28 wins, 4 losses, with 25 of those by knockout?
That's right. He's an Olympic gold medalist, a man whose pedigree is just, undeniable.
And then facing him, Jake Paul, the internet mogul turned boxer.
Coming in with a 12-1 professional record, which, let's be fair, was built primarily on fighting retired MMA stars, basketball players.
And boxers well past their prime.
The chasm, statistically, between these two men, in size, in technical skill, and just in legitimate high-level experience, it was just staggering.
I saw one source describe it as pitting a Formula One champion against someone who just got their learner's permit.
Yeah.
Just because the learner bought a very, very fast car.
That's a perfect analogy. And it leads us right to the core question that is, tearing the boxing community apart.
Was this fight a genuine, gutsy display of Jake Paul's tenacity and toughness? A necessary benchmark to show he's not afraid to face a true monster?
Or was it the opposite? A cynical, predetermined, and sort of choreographed farce that was designed purely to cash in.
And in doing so, ultimately embarrass the integrity of the sport. That's the tightrope we're walking today.
So let's start at the beginning, the inescapable foundation of this event. Section 1, the pre-fight context and the commercial realities.
Right. We absolutely have to acknowledge the mismatch here. Even before the bell rang, every expert view is that this is a substantial mismatch.
One with palpable, serious risks for Paul. And you have to start with the physical attributes, don't you?
The size difference was just colossal.
It wasn't just about what they weighed on the scales, it was about their structure. AJ stands at a towering 6'6", and he weighed in around 245 pounds of genuine, solid heavyweight mass.
Whereas Paul was 6'1" and 216 pounds, which I guess is technically heavyweight.
It is technically a heavyweight, yeah, but the commentators instantly pointed out that Paul's frame is just not that of a true heavyweight boxer.
He wasn't carrying that weight in the same way in muscle density like AJ, was he?
Not at all. He was characterized pretty much universally as a blown-up light heavyweight or cruiserweight.
Right.
The sources all suggested he'd just piled on roughly 30 pounds of mass from his optimal fighting weight, and a lot of that consisted of significant body fat.
And that size disparity, the combination of AJ's height, his reach, his density, the sheer weight, that was always going to result in a massive power differential.
Which, as we saw, proved to be the decisive factor in the 6th round. The big critique was that Paul was simply too bulky and too slow for his height.
And that directly impacted his endurance.
Massive.
That's a crucial point. I mean, carrying too much mass, especially if it's not dense muscle, is a huge, huge burden on your cardiovascular fitness.
We'll definitely link that back to the gassing out later on.
Mm-hmm.
But let's get to the real driver here. Why on earth would Anthony Joshua, with his reputation, take a fight against a man who had such a massive, obvious disadvantage?
The answer is, well, it's blindingly simple, isn't it? It's painted in dollar signs.
Right.
Money.
Just money.
Eddie Hearn, AJ's longtime promoter, he confirmed that AJ was actually slated for a much more legitimate ranking-based fight against Cassius Chaney later that month.
Right.
But the Paul fight, as Hearn put it, was just too good to turn down.
Too good is a bit of an understatement, mate. We're talking about financial figures that make even world title fights look like pocket change.
Oh, absolutely.
The reports circulating, which seem to be widely accepted as true, suggested Jake Paul was set to earn a staggering $92 million from this Netflix broadcast event. That number is just insane. It's unbelievable. And while AJ's purse wasn't fully disclosed, the consensus estimates put his minimum take at around $50 million.
$50 million.
So that immediately settled the debate for commentators about the fight's purpose. It was emphatically not a serious ranking fight.
No.
It was a business transaction purely for cashing in on the spectacle.
It sounds less like a professional boxing match and more like a carefully timed corporate acquisition.
Yeah.
I love the phrase one critic used. He called the entire event AJ's $50 million sparring session.
That phrase just perfectly encapsulates it, the low-risk, high-reward nature of it for Joshua. He was paid an unprecedented sum for what really amounted to a high-level training session against a significantly weaker opponent,
So he guaranteed minimal physical damage.
while maximizing his financial runway for retirement. The boxing purists, of course, they hated it, but from a strictly financial perspective.
It was genius.
It was.
I can see why the money was too tempting. But despite the clear financial motives, the pre-fight rhetoric was still pretty fierce, wasn't it? Which helped sell the spectacle.
Oh, the trash talk was definitely genuine on AJ's side. He had no illusions about Paul's ability at all.
No.
He stated bluntly before the bout, "If I can kill you, I'll kill you." That was his mindset. He also publicly dismissed Paul's claim to the heavyweight division.
What did he say?
He said, "You may call yourself a heavyweight boxer, but let's be honest, you're just heavy, not a true heavyweight."
Savage stuff.
Yeah.
Absolutely savage. But Paul, ever the master of marketing, he had to maintain his trademark confidence, didn't he?
Of course. He maintained the facade, confidently claiming he possessed superior boxing skills to AJ. He even went as far as predicting a knockout victory for himself.
In which round?
The 5th or 6th round. What's fascinating is that Paul picked the exact round the fight did end, which in a bizarre way added to the controversy later on that the ending might have been predetermined.
Right. He sold the dream, he secured the bag, but as soon as that bell rang, his performance in Section 2, the fight dynamics, it quickly made those pre-fight claims look like utter fantasy.
The reality of the ring was immediate, and it was brutal.
It really was.
The opening 4 rounds were a tactical display of pure, unadulterated survival on Jake Paul's part. Analysts across the board used terms like frantic movement, avoiding contact, and marathon defense.
It was exhausting just watching it. Paul's entire strategy was just constant, desperate backpedaling. Sources described him as having danced to stay out of range.
Running away for dear life.
Exactly. One pundit even calculated the literal effort involved, estimating that Paul had backpedaled 3 miles in 15 minutes.
3 miles.
Which suggests he was just burning through his limited fuel supply almost immediately.
And remember that note about him being a blown-up cruiserweight?
That excess mass was severely penalizing his cardiovascular system.
That level of frenetic defensive movement combined with his body structure, it just guaranteed that his gas tank would be empty long before the 8 rounds were up.
He was running a marathon when he was only built for a 100-meter sprint.
Spot on.
And beyond just the running, we saw this highly criticized wrestling base. This was maybe the most bizarre, farcical element of the early rounds.
Absolutely. Whenever AJ managed to cut off the distance or corner Paul, Paul's instinct wasn't to fight out.
Yeah.
It was to clinch desperately, or even worse, diving for the legs. It was almost like he was attempting a single-leg takedown in MMA.
It was so strange to watch.
The constant clinching and falling to the mat led to commentators joking that the fight featured more takedown attempts than Cain Velasquez.
Or any legitimate MMA fight in recent memory. He was just spending an extraordinary amount of time in grappling exchanges rather than boxing exchanges.
A pure cuddle fest, as the commentary team called it.
Yes. And this leads us right to the heart of the Farce debate. The massive criticism directed at Anthony Joshua. If Paul was running and clinching so poorly, why on earth didn't AJ just end it in the 1st or 2nd round?
And this is the fuel for the scripted fire, isn't it? Many experienced analysts and fans firmly believe AJ was pulling his punches.
Or fighting at a drastically reduced intensity.
The figures they were citing were things like AJ operating at 30 to 50% power in those early rounds.
And the visual evidence really supported the critics, you have to say.
Yeah.
It looked deliberate.
It did.
Sources repeatedly observed AJ doing nothing but burn clock, standing at elbow length from Paul, or just staring or jabbing the air when Paul was wide open, trapped in a corner. The critique was that AJ was actively choosing not to deliver the knockout blow.
One frustrated commenter detailed several instances where Paul was, and I quote, dead rubber, wide open with his guard down and nowhere to run.
And what did AJ do?
He simply pulled away from the killer shot. This complete lack of killer instinct, which is usually Joshua's trademark, it just fueled this deep suspicion that he was intentionally letting him gas out.
So was it just purely strategic patience,
No.
waiting for the inevitable cardio failure, or was there a more cynical motive at play?
That's the $1 million question, or $50 million question.
Was he paid to do nothing for 4 rounds to justify the massive purse and give Paul a respectable story of survival? That's what everyone was screaming at their screens.
The evidence, I think, points toward extreme strategic control. Joshua is too seasoned to risk getting caught by a lucky shot, which can happen in any fight.
Sure.
So the theory that he was managing the clock and Paul's energy is very sound. However, the intensity of his restraint, the visual confirmation of him pulling away from clean knockouts, made that predetermined narrative theory very, very compelling.
It felt like he needed to ensure Paul lasted long enough for the spectacle to be worthwhile for Netflix.
It was a very controlled demolition, and the whole thing became so ridiculous that the official actually had to step in.
Yes, the referee became this unlikely voice for the audience, didn't he? He was completely fed up with Paul's tactics, the constant clinching, the falling, the running.
Which is highly unusual, an official intervening to criticize the quality of the performance rather than just penalizing specific fouls.
What exactly did he say? Do we know?
The referee was heard sternly telling Paul that the continuous clinches were making the bout unwatchable. He outright stated, "People didn't pay to see this crap."
Wow.
Or this Cuddle fest. That official rebuke, captured on the broadcast, it just highlighted the level of farce the fight had reached. It proved the audience's frustration was legitimate.
That moment must have been a huge blow to Paul's ego, having a referee publicly shamed him like that. Did that intervention force him to change tack, or was he already just too exhausted to stop running?
Well, the physical collapse was already well underway, but the ref's shaming certainly applied some psychological pressure. However, we do have to give Paul his due here, because he did land his signature offensive weapon a few times.
The famous overhand right that has put down his previous opponents.
Correct. Paul managed to land his overhand right at least 3 times on Joshua, and the subsequent analysis of the impact was perhaps the clearest moment of truth in the entire contest.
It confirmed the huge power differential.
Absolutely.
So what happened when Paul's best shot connected cleanly with AJ?
AJ looked annoyed,
Oh, no.
perhaps, but nothing more. The analysis was stark. The best clean shot Paul landed, put through with all his power behind it, was described as having the effect of literally like a mosquito to AJ.
A mosquito.
It was utterly ineffective. This just confirmed that against a genuine granite-chinned heavyweight like Joshua, who's withstood blows from fighters like Vladimir Klitschko, Paul's power just wasn't a factor.
His punches were heavyweight in name only.
Precisely.
It basically confirmed that the only way Paul was going to win was if AJ had an aneurysm in the ring, because skill and power were never ever going to be enough. And that lack of power, combined with the extreme fatigue, it just set the stage perfectly for Section 3, the climax and the aftermath of the knockout.
By the time we hit round 5, the inevitable collapse occurred. Paul's defensive strategy was just inherently unsustainable.
Given his body and the sheer distance he'd covered.
Exactly. The relentless running meant his gas tank failed completely.
Lurch might it anymore, could he?
No. By round 5, he was visibly gassed out. You could hear him sucking air through his mouth. He'd lost that crucial element of speed and agility required to evade Joshua.
Which allowed AJ to finally and effectively cut off the ring.
Yes, turning that vast Kaseya Center canvas into a very small phone booth.
The moment Paul couldn't run away anymore, the fight was basically over. Tell us about the execution of the finish in round 6. I mean, it was textbook, wasn't it? Regardless of the earlier theatrics.
It was. AJ transitioned from that tactical patience to very targeted aggression. Commentators noted a strategic shift. He began connecting with increasing accuracy.
He started with body shots, right?
Yes, often using straight punches to the sternum, highly effective body shots designed to slow Paul down even further before going for the head. He was systematically dismantling him.
And a final sequence.
The final sequence was sudden, and it was decisive. It eliminated all lingering doubt about AJ's power. It was a straight right hand to the jaw, delivered with maximum intent.
Some viewers instantly called that punch legendary. The slow-motion footage showed this intense volume of Paul's sweat flying off upon impact.
He went down heavily, and the fight was officially stopped by TKO in the 6th round.
Let's just clarify that for anyone listening who may not follow boxing religiously,
Yeah.
TKO means technical knockout, right?
Exactly. A technical knockout, a TKO, is declared when the referee decides a fighter cannot continue safely, even if they could theoretically beat the 10 count.
Right.
In this case, Paul was down, he was obviously compromised, and the referee made the decision to step in and stop the fight before Paul could suffer any more unnecessary damage.
And the consequences of that final punch were instantly clear, weren't they? It really demonstrated the seriousness of AJ's power when he finally chose to deploy it.
Absolutely. The immediate post-fight buzz transitioned very quickly into grave concern. Subsequent visual evidence and official reports confirmed Paul had suffered a broken jaw.
A severe mandibular fracture.
Yeah,
The descriptions coming out of the fan accounts were, well, horrifyingly vivid.
They were. While the clinical term is a fracture, the fan chatter sensationalized it. There was talk of a whole-ass row of teeth displaced and teeth zagging instead of zigging.
Grim.
But it was confirmation that Joshua landed with absolute surgical venom.
What's really intriguing to me is this psychological response to this severe injury.
It served a kind of dual purpose. For the boxing purists who felt they had watched a fake or embarrassing performance, the severity of the injury acted as a sort of perverse consolation prize.
Right. It proved it was real after all.
Exactly. It proved beyond any doubt that AJ truly landed with venom and that the punches were serious. It vindicated the power differential, confirming that Paul paid a very heavy physical price for his massive financial reward.
That detail is absolutely critical because it feeds directly into the massive debate about whether Paul was legitimately knocked out or if he strategically quit.
And the TKO verdict remains heavily contested. The prevailing view among frustrated observers was that Paul was visibly defeated and in pain, and he used that sequence to manage his exit.
What's the evidence for that?
They noted that he didn't get up for the count, but conspicuously stood up just after 10.
Which suggests he had intentionally timed the final count.
That's the theory. That he was taking a strategic dive, but only after sustaining legitimate visible damage.
A cynical interpretation.
It is. The argument is that Paul realized he was badly hurt, possibly terrified of the sustained punishment, and he knew he would not make the full 8 rounds.
So choosing to stand up just after the count was completed allowed him plausible deniability.
Precisely. He took the TKO loss, which is acceptable, but he avoided being flatlined or suffering further career-ending punishment. It was a highly managed, calculated exit.
One designed to protect his overall narrative.
Exactly.
That's the epitome of celebrity boxing, isn't it? Prioritizing the narrative outcome over the pure competitive result. It suggests the loss itself was less important than how he lost.
And that lasting 6 rounds was, in itself, deemed a victory.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 4, where we tackle the explosion of fan and expert reaction, covering the 3 major critiques: farce, fraud, or simply a massive skill gap.
Even with the definitive knockout, that rigged narrative remains pervasive among a sizable portion of the audience. They see the early action, the referee's intervention, and the late knockout as proof of something sinister.
The conspiracy theories were rampant immediately, weren't they? The key belief being that AJ was in on the scam.
And that there was a predetermined narrative agreed upon beforehand to ensure Paul survived a certain number of rounds.
To give him that moral victory.
And the evidence they cite boils down entirely to AJ's controversial patience. His failure to take kill shots when Paul was cornered, and that sudden late-round switch in aggression.
It's hard to ignore, isn't it?
Yeah.
AJ went from jabbing the air for 4 rounds to delivering a legendary jaw-breaking KO in mere minutes. For skeptics, that massive shift in intent was just too convenient.
Too neatly packaged for the Netflix audience.
But the experienced boxing commentators, they offered a robust, purely technical counterargument to this scripting claim. They defended AJ's behavior as intelligent strategy, not collusion.
They argued that it is incredibly difficult to knock someone out who doesn't engage.
Someone whose entire strategy is focused purely on survival.
Exactly. AJ was simply waiting for the inevitable. Paul's complete physical exhaustion. Rushing in against an opponent, even a weaker one, who is desperately flailing and clinching creates unnecessary risk.
Risk of headbutts, accidental elbows.
Or, worst of all, taking an unexpected punch that compromises your own strategy.
So AJ was just acting like a veteran, strategically removing all unnecessary risk because the money was guaranteed anyway.
Precisely. They drew a clear analogy comparing Paul to Francis and Ganu. And Ganu wanted to win, he engaged, and AJ easily defeated him.
Right.
Paul, on the other hand, only wanted to survive, which changes the required tactic entirely. As one commentator argued, if Paul had tried to fight AJ the way Ngannou did, aggressively,
He would have been slept in the first round.
and the spectacle would have been ruined. AJ waited until Paul was physically incapable of running anymore.
He waited for the defense mechanism to fail before initiating the offense. That makes absolute sense from a strategic perspective. Now let's turn to the performance reviews for AJ. Critics didn't hold back, did they, even though he won by TKO?
No, they did not. Many called AJ's overall boxing performance an embarrassment for someone of his world-class caliber.
Wow.
They criticized him for failing to cut off the ring effectively in the first 4 rounds or land meaningful combinations early on. This led to those opening rounds being universally described by the sources as dog shit, unwatchable.
A terrible advertisement for the sport.
So he won, but he won ugly, and he allowed the fight to become a farce in the process.
That's the critical viewpoint.
However, his dedicated supporters argued that AJ was tactically brilliant and strategically playing the long game. They pointed out that he was skillfully putting his immense heavyweight weight onto Paul during every clinch.
That's a subtle, often overlooked tactic, isn't it?
It is. Used to wear down an opponent's legs and shoulders. They argued he simply didn't need to risk anything, and that the whole exercise was a highly lucrative sparring session that allowed him to shake off ring rust without taking any damage.
It sounds like his supporters just redefined success for this fight. The goal wasn't a spectacular knockout in round 1.
No.
It was maximizing the financial return while minimizing the physical output. It's a very mercenary approach.
It is. Now, what about Jake Paul? His performance reviews were, as you'd expect, predictably polarized.
The haters were vociferous, calling him shite, a clown, and confirming that the fight was terrible due to the constant running and the middle school wrestling maneuvers.
They felt he showed no ability to fight under pressure.
None. But somehow, despite the TKO loss and the broken jaw, Paul still managed to garner a strange kind of respect from some corners of the mainstream media.
Purely for the act of stepping into the ring.
That's the celebrity factor at play, isn't it?
It is. His defenders claimed he showed balls and deserved respect for taking hard shots and lasting 6 rounds against a former 2-time heavyweight champion.
Right.
The core argument here is that he proved he is not afraid to lose, a quality they found admirable, especially compared to his carefully curated opponent list before this bout.
That definition of success, simply not being afraid to lose, is precisely what sets celebrity boxing apart from professional boxing. And it leads us directly into our final section, Section 5, the implications for the future of boxing.
This fight, regardless of its entertainment value, it really did set a definitive benchmark for Jake Paul. The outcome serves as definitive, costly, and painful proof that Jake is a complete amateur when stepping into the highest legitimate level of boxing.
He can no longer claim to be a serious contender based on wins against retired MMA fighters.
Not anymore.
So what does this definitive professional loss, coupled with a severe injury like a broken jaw, mean for his career path moving forward?
The consensus among serious boxing commentators is absolutely clear. If Paul is genuinely serious about becoming a competitive boxer, he must take a significant break to heal.
And then immediately drop weight.
Yes. Cruiserweight, at 200 pounds, is considered his optimal natural frame.
Why is that drop so crucial?
Because he cannot sustain the required cardio endurance carrying that excess 15 to 20 pounds. Being heavy doesn't matter if you can't throw a power punch or make it past the 4th round without hyperventilating.
His physique at 216 pounds guaranteed his gas tank failure, as we saw so vividly.
Exactly. And he needs to dramatically change his opponent selection, doesn't he?
No more calling out legends or retired stars.
Absolutely. The next steps, if he's serious, they must be foundational. He needs to transition away from fighting retired MMA fighters and old boxers.
And start fighting legitimate journeymen or nobodies on undercards to gain genuine, durable experience.
He needs to learn how to fight more than 4 rounds without gassing out, how to manage true pressure. He needs to learn the craft from the ground up, fighting opponents who are actively trying to win, not just survive or collect a check.
But the biggest question mark is psychological, isn't it? After suffering a severe mandibular fracture and being so clearly outclassed, does he still harbor the desire to return to the challenge of a top-tier boxer?
You know, the ones he used to call out the Canelos and the Tank Davises of the world?
Exactly.
The immediate reaction suggests hesitation. Unlike his previous wins, where he instantly called out a new opponent post-AJ, Paul reportedly wanted to take a break and regroup.
The reality check.
The pain and the definitive nature of the TKO might finally temper his ambitions. He was forced to confront the difference between being a celebrity boxer and being a real boxer who can withstand a world-class blow.
Now let's pivot to Anthony Joshua's trajectory. This fight was a huge success for him, even if it was criticized as poor boxing entertainment.
Financially and physically, it was the perfect transaction. He secured massive money, and the fight was effective, low-risk sparring.
He shook off any potential ring rust without taking any significant damage whatsoever.
Given Paul's complete lack of power, yes.
But the narrative from critics is that he's just padding his bank account in his late 30s instead of seeking true competitive challenges to cement his legacy.
That critique is rampant. Many feel AJ is coasting towards retirement, milking these celebrity matches for maximum earnings. They worry that the focus on the financial spectacle diminishes his legacy as a genuine champion.
But what's next?
Well, the future target for AJ remains significant. He is still expected to aim for a big bout in the summer of 2026.
The fight everyone still wants to see. The one that would truly cleanse the palate after the Cuddle Fest.
Of course, a fight with Tyson Fury is still the major, lingering discussion point. Fans are desperate for this fight.
They're hoping that a proper Fury versus Joshua clash would rinse out the taste of this shit and reestablish AJ's commitment to the legitimate heavyweight contest.
And finally, deliver the matchup they've waited years for.
So finally, we have to look at the state of the sport itself. Did boxing win, or did it lose here?
And this is the crux of the legacy this fight leaves. For the purists, the reputational damage for boxing was substantial. Many felt the whole event was an embarrassing display.
Critics claiming boxing lost.
And comparing the entire operation unfavorably to WWE. Some even said that professional wrestling is more real because at least it guarantees genuine entertainment rather than 5 rounds of running and clinching.
So it felt like the spectacle had completely subsumed the sport's integrity. The performance was awful, the result was predictable, and yet millions of people tuned in.
That's one perspective. But the counter perspective is purely financial and logistical, and it's immensely powerful.
Right.
The fact that the fight, broadcast on Netflix, generated such massive money and interest proves this commercial model is incredibly successful and cannot be ignored.
And why is the platform itself so important in the grand scheme?
Well, it offers a crucial alternative financial engine for major fights. For years, the biggest legitimate bouts have relied heavily on the controversial reliance on Saudi princes and the geopolitical issues associated with hosting megacards in the Middle East.
Fans felt promoters were groveling to that funding source.
They did. The Netflix model proves that celebrity-driven spectacles can create massive economic success domestically, offering a viable alternative funding path.
It's a messy contradiction, isn't it? We hate the predictable show, we hate the running, but we love the revenue model and the access it provides. So what single factor stands out most to you in this entire scenario? The farce, the money, or the broken jaw?
Well, the broken jaw confirmed the reality of the power differential, that one man was a true heavyweight and the other was not. But what truly stands out is the cynicism and the calculation made by all parties involved. Everyone, especially AJ's camp, knew the outcome was virtually guaranteed. The goal of the event shifted from achieving a victory through skill to simply maximizing the spectacle and managing Paul's narrative of survival until the appropriate moment.
It was essentially a multi-million-dollar business performance masquerading as a boxing match.
Where the key performance indicator was the length of time Jake Paul remained standing.
Exactly. And the conversation surrounding this whole affair highlights a fundamental, perhaps permanent, shift in the economics of high-level combat sports entertainment.
It does.
So here's the big question you have to take away from this. Given the sheer magnitude of the money involved, and the fact that Jake Paul can now credibly claim a moral victory just by lasting 6 rounds with a severe injury, because he achieved the financial objective, has the goal of professional boxing now fundamentally shifted? Has the objective moved from achieving victory through superior skill to simply surviving long enough to maximize the financial spectacle and secure the biggest check possible? What kind of future does this set for high-profile boxing, where survival becomes a greater asset than skill?
It forces us to ask whether the spectacle has simply eaten the sport entirely. That's a question for the ages.
Food for thought, indeed. We'll leave you to wrestle with that one. Thanks for joining us for the deep dive.